and then I'll share my, so let me first welcome all of you, and Dr. Clara Peter is going to give a more formal welcome speech.
I don't have anything formal. Everything is informal.
Okay.
All right, guys. So I would like to welcome you to the 2021 Undergraduate Research Symposium. That's actually our first symposium at the Department of Economics. And I'm very glad to start this new tradition. So I think our department has a lot to share. And so there's just a rising number of students being involved in economics research. And that's really, really great, because we can see a rising demand from potential employers for analytical research skills. And our students certainly have a lot to share. And so we can see, at least from a lot of our past students, where they end up and what kind of places in both government organizations, financial consulting companies, feds, and PhD program. So there's definitely a rising demand for research skills. And this year we have outstanding honors students who are going to shine when the time will come in the spring. So right now, we're just sharing the ideas for the research. It's not a full-fledged research yet, so we're not right now yet showing full results. It's mostly the ideas, but even the ideas are very interesting. So I don't want it to talk too much. So we would like, at the end of this conference, then Professor Vaidyanathan will talk about research grant opportunities, and we'll have a Q&A session also on undergraduate research opportunities. So I'm going to follow the Google timer. So we have 4 minutes for each presentation, and then you'll hear a signal. So when the 4 minute will pass, so that will have equal time to everybody. And now Geetha is going to, Professor Vaidyanathan will be moderating.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. So for presenters, when it is time for me to go to the next slide, please let me know, just say next, and then I'll change the slide. So welcome again. And
hi, my name is Laura Brozovich, and my research question for this semester is, does health system affiliation improve the financial performance of rural hospitals? Some motivation for my research is that there's been an increase in rural hospital closures, with 181 rural hospitals closed since 2005. Simultaneously, there's also been an increase in hospital mergers, with 380 rural hospitals involved in a merger between 2005 and 2016. Past research on this topic has only focused on portraying correlation between financial performance and integration, and there hasn't been much focus given to causation with financial performance and hospital affiliation. Next. My empirical model includes a dependent variable of hospital financial performance, which is measured using different financial metrics in the hospital. And then my independent variable is health system affiliation, which is a binary variable. 1 if a hospital is in a system, and 0 if a hospital is not in a system. And then I'll also be using an instrumental variable approach with certificate of need laws, which will help to control for reverse causality. And certificate of need laws are laws that help regulate expenditures in hospitals in different states, and they kind of control like the ease of a merger happening. My unit of observation is individual rural hospitals, and my time is measured in years. Some control variables are population size, percent insured, distance to the nearest hospital, and percent covered by Medicaid to control for competition. My error term is just idiosyncratic shocks to financial performance. And then endogeneity is controlled using time and geographic fixed effects and the instrumental difference in difference approach. And then my empirical model is below. And then I'm using the certificate of need laws as my instrumental variable and a border discontinuity design. And so my sample will only include hospitals represented in states with the exogenous policy shocks in my time period, and then their neighboring states. So I'll use the bordering counties in the treatment state and the border counties in the control state. And in my time period, 2011 to 2018, only Indiana and New Hampshire underwent changes in their certificate of need laws. So I'll use these 2 states and then 7 neighbor states and 83 counties in total. And so the top figure shows kind of the design that I'll be using. So the treatment state and the control state and like the 2 border counties will be used to compare financial metrics before the policy shock and then after the policy shock. And then, sorry, the bottom figure was just parallel trends and operating margin, which is one of the financial metrics before the policy shock in 2018, where certificate of need laws were instated.
All right, hi everyone. So my thesis is on the labor market and the flows during the pandemic based on unemployment insurance. And so my research question is based on about 50% of the states withdrawing from unemployment insurance back in June 2021. So fairly recently they withdrew. Mainly these were red states, and they felt that this was their way of trying to get people back into the employed sector from unemployed or even from not in the labor force, because they were seeing that there was a huge gap in the numbers that were employed. And so we're trying to see if there was a difference in labor market flows between states that withdrew from unemployment insurance in mid-June and early July versus states that didn't. And so we're looking at 9 monthly labor market flows between employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force sectors. And so we're trying to see if this change in policy did achieve its purpose in getting people back to work. And so for the data, I'll be using the CPS from March 2020 to 2021, October 2021. And we're starting in March, so we can have meet the parallel trends assumption and make sure that the 2 types of states are seeing similar changes in employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. And this is conducted by the BLS across the United States, and we're going to be using a multinomial logit model. And so this model, our dependent variable is going to be the probability of your employment status changing. And this dependent variable is going to be based on a number of independent variables. So the first one that's the most important is, or the first 2 that are really important, is your current employment status, as well as if your state withdrew from unemployment insurance and if that month that we're looking at is actually after or before the time that they withdrew. And then we also have state fixed effects, we have time fixed effects, just to account for differences, intrinsic differences in states. And then we're also looking at state level characteristics such as unemployment rate, consumer spending, minimum wage. And then we're also going to be looking at individual level characteristics such as race, age, gender, marital status, immigration status. And then finally, we also have just our in general error term, and we're including this because we won't fully be able to capture, why someone's employment status is changing, just because it is subject to a bunch of different outcomes, I guess.
All right, hello, I am Troy, and this is my honors thesis so far. I've decided to look at the impact of trade shocks on worker migration choices. So my primary question revolves around persistent changes in levels of trade thanks to an exogenous shock, which here is captured by a change in exchange rates. Now, these changes in exchange rates are going to lead to changes in imports, which are going to lead to changes in employment in respective industries as imports rise and fall, which then people will respond by either switching jobs, retraining, or moving for greater opportunity. Now, available evidence and anecdotes suggest that the US has changed to a largely service-based economy. This can lead to a decline in labor demand for traditional manufacturing centers and manufacturing employment, mining employment, farms, since employment in retail, healthcare, and other service professions have exploded in the 21st century. I think the average labor share for just retail and healthcare professions combined is about 20% on average. So net migration patterns also suggest that people are moving. The main question is why. This project aims to see if the why is moving for greater economic opportunity. The patterns suggest this, since rural areas have seen consistent outflows of people from the late 90s to present day, while southern urban areas with large concentrations of these service jobs have seen large expansion over the same period. Next.
Sorry about that.
It's all good. So my methodology, I'm going to be using the current population survey, specifically the AECS component, which is a once yearly survey taken. It captures that about 4 to 5% of Americans decide to move in a given year. I have a little breakdown off to the right of the average number of people who move every year. The vast majority decide to stay in the same location, but right now we're looking at the people who are moving either within the county and within states and even between states. The shock is going to be captured through an exposure measure, which is going to be predicted import shares by worker, by the commuting zone they live in, by their year. That will also be a lagged measure later on. Exposure right now is obviously greatest for manufacturing workers and agricultural workers. Those are the people who are going to be greatest affected by these imports, since they're directly coming into their industry. Predicting shares on exchange rates can also help to capture the effect of trade on the service industry. Location is available at a state level. It's available through the census and both through USDA labor market areas, and it's linkable by household in the CPS to commuting zones. So a basic regression using demographic variables and the initial exposure variable found that age and health are likely the most significant non-economic indicators of movement. Exposure to imports, base imports from 1 year prior, wasn't exactly significant. So looking at those predicted import shares by more tight locations will be the next step to make sure that we're looking at all possible routes for this to affect people.
Alrighty, hello everyone. My name is Linnea Hollander, and this is my honors thesis research. So I'm looking at how US solar panel imports have changed with temporary trade barriers. So this will be about trade destruction and also some trade diversion. So my research question is, how have trade protectionist policies that the US has placed against China and Taiwan in the 2010s impacted both the overall trend of solar panel imports into the United States, as well as the composition of those trade flows? So this question has kind of two major components. The first component being trade destruction, which is the decline in trade between two trading partners following the implementation of trade barriers. So that's, for example, the US's trade levels with China after the US places a tariff on China. And then the second piece is about trade diversion, which is the increase in trade between one country and a third-party country that's not impacted by that trade barrier. So this, as an example, is something like the US trade level with Malaysia after the US places a tariff on China. So a little bit of background. So the solar panel industry has exploded from basically 2000 to current. And solar prices have fallen considerably since the 1990s, and they are continuing to decline as solar energy and renewable energy in general becomes, people have become more interested in protecting the environment and having, cheaper and cheaper energy. And China has become the world's leading supplier of solar panels, with 80% of solar panels in 2019 being manufactured there. So the massive rise in solar imports from China in the early 2010s prompted US solar companies to file a petition in 2011 with the International Trade Association that alleged illegal dumping and subsidization by the Chinese government. So I'm using import data from the US International Trade Commission to look at trade destruction, and I'm going to construct a demand function that estimates the total imports in any quarter from 1990 to 2018 to be a function of basically just the general world average price for solar panels, and then a bunch of US specific factors. So why are we demanding solar panels? Could be because our income has grown, also depending on how expensive gas or oil or other types of electricity are at that point. And then for trade diversion, I'm looking at how the share of total imports from one country is based on kind of the price ratio that that country has at that point in that quarter, and then other country specific factors from the place of origin, like potentially their income or the exchange rate or their unemployment, as well as the tariff amount on that country. So that's kind of the key variable there is, so if there is a tariff, we'll see how that rate has increases the price, but also just the very fact that there is a tariff on that country will play a role. So the graphs off to the side are some very basic graphs that I have made. And the top one shows the import quantity of solar panels from just China. And so you can see that in the early 2010s, there was a very large spike in imports, and then shortly after it declined rapidly. So just seeing if that rapid decline in solar panel imports from China was due to those tariffs that were placed on China in around 2012 or not. And then the lower graph just shows total imports from the whole world. And so you can see there's a similar kind of up and down trend during the 2010s when a lot of these temporary trade barriers were placed on the different countries.
Hi, my name is Xiaoyun, and my research topic is the robustness to double misspecification of various estimators of average treatment effects, which is in econometrics. And maybe some of you haven't learned this yet, as this is not taught in 470 or 570. So I will introduce some relevant concepts first. So the basic setup is in the first equation there. So Y is the observed outcome, D is the treatment status, and Y of 1 and Y of 0 are the potential outcomes with and without treatment respectively. So Y and D can be observed in data, while Y of D cannot be observed. It's just the potential outcomes. And the average treatment effects is just the expected value of the difference in the potential outcomes. And also in the data, there are some observed covariates X. For example, Y can be income, D can be whether someone went to college, and X can be gender, race, state, etc. And Y of D here is the potential income if someone went to college or didn't went to college. And we're interested in estimating the average treatment effects of going to college. So basically, there are two estimation methods, regression adjustment and inverse propensity score weighting, IPW. For our A, we divide the whole sample into two groups, the treatment group and the control group. And then we run regression of Y on X for each group and get the predicted values. So the average treatment effect will be the average of the difference in those predicted values. For IPW, the propensity score is the probability of being selected into the treatment group. And it turns out that we can write ATE as a function of the propensity score under some assumptions. So empirically, we run regression of D on X to get the propensity score, and the average treatment effects can be estimated by the predicted propensity score and Y and D. And these are the two basic methods of estimating ATE. And if we combine these two methods by some mathematical manipulation, we get a doubly robust estimator. And this is called doubly robust because we only need either of the two models to be correctly specified to get a non-biased estimator. So my research question is, what if both models are misspecified? Would the doubly robust estimator still be unbiased? And how would these estimators perform under double misspecification? Which one will yield the smallest errors? So by misspecification, I assume there exists some omitted variables, and the omitted variables can contain a lot of information, such as square terms, interaction terms, etc. And the method I'm using is Monte Carlo simulation, which is based on repeated random sampling. And then we can estimate ATE by those estimators and based on the simulated sample. From my preliminary results, the intuition here is that regression adjustment will be better under double misspecification because the propensity score in ATE model is in the denominator, which is why it's called inverse. So it's going to exert huge influence on the estimation if the misspecified IPW model gives you a propensity score that's near 0 or 1. That's all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Halin Liu. I'm in the ECON Senior Honor Thesis program. So I'm going to talk about my research question, motivation, and then the model that I'm interested in. So the research question is there volatility spillover across financial markets? Or we could say, how does one-way causal relation between past volatility in one market affect current volatility in another market? Next slide, please. So the motivation behind this research is, since we all know the volatility spillover across like all industries, everything happening in our world has been a major issue. Like they all, sometimes they have a peak, sometimes they will drop down for the prices. So absence of volatility spillover sometimes tell us that the major sources of disturbance are changes in asset or market-specific fundamentals. And absence of volatility spillover also implies that one large shock increases the volatility only in that asset or that market. So the model I'm going to use is called GARCH model. I know this may not be familiar to some of you. So GARCH model is basically like I will use time series stuff with a subscript like small p under the returns for each industries. For instance, y of t equals a plus b1 times y of t minus 1. And then I will make the subscript as t minus 1, t minus 2, t minus 3, etc. So GARCH model is basically, it could help us to predict the volatility of returns on financial assets. Since I'm interested in how does like one market in the past affect the prices at the present, since I'm interested in the forecasting and prediction of the prices. And GARCH model is also appropriate for our time series data, where the variance of the error term is seriously autocorrected following autoregressive moving average process. So the GARCH model can help me achieve the forecasting part as well as with the correct time lags. And GARCH model is also useful to access the risk because I want to hedge risk and expected returns for the asset that exhibits cluster periods of volatility in returns.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzy Mabe, and this is my thesis research so far. So for my thesis, I'm studying the effect of differences in financial literacy between men and women on the gender wealth gap. So it has been established in literature that women have lower financial literacy on average than men. And there's also a well-documented gender wealth gap that persists despite controlling for income, meaning it exists separate from the better-known wage gap. So a reason for the gap could be differences in investment behavior. For example, if men tend to invest while women tend to keep their money in savings accounts, men would have more wealth than women by the time they reach retirement age, even when you control for income. So one factor influencing investment behavior is risk aversion. I know that's the first thing I thought of when I was thinking about investment behavior. However, it's been shown that the gap persists even when you control for risk aversion. So I plan to contribute to the literature by considering how financial literacy affects this gender wage gap. So for my data, I'm using the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth from 1979, and I'm using the past 10 years of data. So this is for two reasons. First, the participants are nearing retirement age, which is the demographic that I'd like to consider. And second, The survey includes an extensive financial literacy section, and that starts in 2012. So my key variables. So my key independent variable is net wealth, and my key explanatory variables are gender and financial literacy. So financial literacy is measured through a series of questions asked to participants about their financial knowledge and planning, and those capture both perceived and actual financial literacy. So this is my empirical model. So on the right, or on the left, I have wealth. And then on the right, I have the gender variable and a financial literacy variable, as well as an interaction term between them to determine how financial literacy affects the wealth of men and women differently. This is the most important part of my model because that captures sort of what I want to capture in my thesis. And finally, I have a set of controls, time and individual fixed effects, and an error term.
Hi, y'all. So my name is Elise Manzari, and I am studying the effect of professor gender on students' GPA, mental health, so their anxiety and depression levels, and then their level of interaction in class and with professors. So like how comfortable they are asking questions in class and going to office hours, that kind of thing. So basically my contribution to literature is, the first thing I'm doing is I'm providing a much needed update because most of the literature on this topic is from before or around the 90s, because in the 1990s, the gender gap reversed, meaning that women in the average American university began to make up the majority of the average American university student body. And then the next thing I aim to do is specify the channel of influence of professor gender, if there is an influence. So you might think that there would be a role model effect, meaning that professors and students who have like genders, the professors act as a role model for the students. Or you might think that there are certain characteristics or like teaching styles that female professors have that male professors don't, or vice versa, and that affects student outcomes. And then I'm also looking at the effect of professor gender on mental health. So my data comes from two data sets that I'm merging together. So the first one is survey data from first year students at UNC. It covers fall 2019 and spring 2020. And then I'm also merging in administrative data that was provided to me by the university. And then so my method is I am using ordinary least squares models for GPA, anxiety, depression, and the level of interaction. So as for my preliminary results, so the first thing I found is that female students on average tend to take more courses with female professors. So female students take around 50% of their classes on average in my data with female professors, as compared to male students who take about 43% of their classes with female professors. I also found that the term, like the semester GPA, was the same for male and female students, and that it increased over time from about 3.58 to about 3.64 from fall 2019 to spring 2020. And then I also found that female students are more likely than male students to have anxiety and depression. And this basically just supports what has been found in previous literature, saying that female people or girls tend to have more anxiety and depression than men. And then lastly, I found that female students tend to interact less in class and with professors than male students. So they feel less comfortable going to office hours or asking a question to a professor or in class.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nico, and I'm in the honors thesis program. And my topic focuses on the relationship between market competition and labor market discrimination. And so I used the labor market for footballers in Europe as a setting for examining this relationship. And so in this labor market, the players are the workers and the clubs that they play for are the firms. And so I'll go into the research question, but to give some slight background for people who aren't as familiar with soccer or football, essentially players are contracted to teams for what tends to be like 4 years. And at the end of these contracts, the players can move to a different team if they want, but they can move while they're still under contract if the team they're moving to pays what's called a transfer fee. So each player gets assigned essentially a transfer value, which is how much a team would essentially need to pay for them to procure them from another team. So with that in mind, my research question is, what is the effect of competition on the difference in transfer values between players of different national origins? So the national origins is like the demographic group in this, like the different demographic groups in the study. And the transfer values would be like the dependent variable. You can go on to the next slide. Okay, so moving on to the potential contribution of this study. So taking a step back, it broadly looks at the theory proposed by Becker in 1957 when he published his book, The Economics of Discrimination, where he illustrated theoretically that an increase in competition in a product market would cause a decrease in discrimination in the associated labor market. So the idea that I had was to test this theory in the setting of using soccer. And in terms of the contribution, most of the popular papers on this topic are either old or they don't sufficiently prove causality, right? They'll take a correlation that, some event causes women to be paid less than men as an indication of discrimination, when there could be confounding variables. Go on to the next slide. And so to try and resolve this, I use a difference in differences approach, which people have mentioned earlier, and I won't go into the technical details. And this slide is a little cluttered, so I'm sorry about that. But what you really want to get out of it is that the dependent variable is the transfer value of a player, which is Y. And then the key explanatory variable is competition enhancing shock, which is denoted by T. And in my project, I'll take this to be a new broadcasting deal, which will bring in additional revenue to a league at a specific time. You can go on to the next slide. And then, so just a remark about the data. So I'm actually constructing the data set by web scraping using Python. And the data comes from worldfootball.net and transfermarket.com. And so the sample in this study is players from the top 5 European leagues. And the top 5 is a sort of an arbitrary term, but these are the largest 5 soccer leagues in the world, at least in terms of revenue and viewership. And the time period of this study is 2004 to 2021.
Hi, my name is Aichi. And today we're going to talk about our summer research topic, changes in the zip code level rent distribution under COVID-19 and the bit rent theory. We would like to thank Daniel Barker as our advisor for his valuable assistance.
The classical bit rent model states that people are willing to pay more to reside closer to the CBD to save opportunity costs of commuting. However, under the pandemic, as the importance and the frequency of commuting fall, we are motivated to explore if rent distribution will change accordingly. That is, will distance to CBD become less valuable in rent determination?
In designing our study, we divided our cities into 2 groups, the 12 most popular cities and the rest, to account for heteroscedasticity. Simply put, the rental markets in big and small cities may react differently to COVID-19. In addition, this grouping criteria is also employed by an NBER working paper. This paper explores the donut effect, that during the pandemic, real estate demand, as measured by rents or prices, reallocates away from major city centers towards the outskirts of the cities, and that this phenomenon is more significant in the 12 most popular cities. We plotted rent distribution of the 2 groups before and during the pandemic.
As shown on the plot on the left, the solid orange line is a proxy for the bit rent curve in the 12 most popular cities before pandemic, and its downward slopes meets the prediction by the bit rent model. On the other group, the approximated Bayesian curve for the other group is represented by the blue dashed line, which is surprisingly upward sloping. From this plot, we can also observe that the coefficient on distance has decreased in both groups since the pandemic, which is consistent with our hypothesis.
We also took great caution of both time trend, the slide please, both the time trend of rent and the time trend of the valuation. I'm sorry, the previous slide, please.
Sorry.
Both the time trend of rent and the time trend of the rent, the valuation of living closer to downtown to control variables that are often ignored in previous studies. From the other plot, we noticed that the time trend differs before and during the pandemic, and we captured this difference by a COVID indicator.
In constructing our model,
Next, please.
In constructing our models, we started from the classical Bayesian model and built upon it. We added COVID indicator and its interaction term with distance, which is our key variable. We included standard control variables and fixed effects, as well as trend variables, as we mentioned earlier. We also employed a dual layer COVID indicator approach in column 5 and separated regression by 2 groups in the column 6.
The results from our main model in column 4 suggest statistically significant evidence that the interaction term between the COVID indicator and distance is positive, and locating 1 mile away from the CBD during the pandemic will result in a 1% less decrease in rent. This result affirms our hypothesis. We also found that the group of the 12 most populous cities experienced a minor change, which challenges the donut effect. Lastly, we found that during lockdowns, the ratio of downtown rent over suburban rent rose instead of falling, suggesting that urban amenity value did not fall despite the severity of the pandemic.
This paper adds credibility to the Bayesian theory and affirms the argument that residential location and commuting cost is a trade-off. Moreover, it provides foresight into how the rental market may develop as commuting becomes less necessary, with the projection that substantial employment position will remain partially online post-pandemic. Thanks all.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Cindy and I conducted a summer research with Dr. Mike Aguilar. And for this presentation, we want to share our experiences and some research tips for you guys who are interested in doing this type of summer research. Next, please. Thank you. So start with our research topic. Our research is related to corporate finance and financial economics. We are investigating the effect of 2 competing theories in this field, which are the pecking order theory and the trade-off theory on the corporate leverage behavior. And we want to help the corporate managers better map out their leverage policy through analyzing the data consisted of over 5,000 American firms and over the 20 years period of time. Next part, please. Next page, please.
Yeah, just
Okay, so now I want to talk about our timeline for the paper. So in February, after we decided to do our summer research, we reached out to our supervisor, Dr. Mike Aguilar. And here, one really important point I want to share to you guys is that making sure that the interested research area of your supervisor should match that of yours so that the supervisor can better help you to do the summer research. And then during the March, we submitted our research plan and we officially started our research by exploring a lot of literature review in May and did a lot of data work during June and July. I would say that the data work is the most challenging part, like gathering the data, cleaning the data, and processing the data. So please make sure that you start the data part as early as possible as you finish the literature review part. And then in July, we constructed different models, such as the ID model with fixed effect. And then we wrote our final paper during August and September. And I would say that paperwork is actually the easiest part because you already have all your results ready during the past few months. So I would say that listing out the timeline of your research before you actually start doing it is super important because it could make sure that you and your friend are always on the right track and remind you to not delay any of your work. Next page, please. So one last tip is that making sure you have a really clear and efficient way to communicate with your supervisor, like and construct different folders that correspond to each part of your paper. And also meeting notes with your supervisor is quite important because like for every meeting, you have more details on your research and more updates. In order to not forget them as you finish your meeting, it's quite important to like write them down in a bullet point format like this. I think that's pretty much about our presentation today. I hope those tips and experience could help you guys understand more about this summer research. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your progress in the honors thesis research, and for the summer 2021 recipients for sharing their research findings, as well as how they planned during summer to conduct the research. So I'm Geeta Vaidyanathan, the Director of Undergraduate Studies, and I sent a lot of email to all of you. I have already sent the notification for the summer 2022 research, which has details about the different grants that are going to be made in summer, as well as deadline. So we have announced 4 grants for summer 2022, and we expect to give each of these grants to 2 students, maybe 3 for some of them. So the first is Matthew Guest Grant Award. So this grant is made possible due to a very generous donation by Matthew Guest, and that is why it is named after him. We also have grants this time to do research in data analytics, and this is the first time we are going to award grant for this due to the increasing popularity of work in data analytics. We have been awarding this underrepresented research grant award, so underrepresented group research grant award. And lastly, the Mayo grant. In fact, the last 2 students who spoke about their summer research were recipients of Mayo grant last year, I believe. So each student, so students can apply on their own or with a partner. Today's presenters of summer 2001 grant award worked as a pair. So each student will be awarded $3,000. You will need to find a topic and a faculty advisor. So March 1st is the deadline for submitting the application. So which means, you need to start thinking about what you want to work on at this time. Make connections with professors with whom you have taken class, as well as others, and start talking about what you want to do so that you can submit your proposal by the March 1st deadline. Okay. So we are going to have a Q&A session, and I'm going to stop share. And I believe Dr. Donna Gillespie, the chair of the Econ department, is here as well. So I want to welcome Dr. Donna Gillespie, chair of the economics department, and she might have a few words to say.
I'm just very impressed with everything that I just heard for the last hour. It was great to hear about the honors thesis work. We're all going to have to do this again so you can tell us the results from all of your interesting projects. And it was great to hear from the summer research folks and what work they've done. So it's just very encouraging to see the depth of work that's being done by our undergraduates. And so please talk to all your friends, and hopefully it's going to be a positive experience. You can tell them that at the end of the year, and just encourage them to do the same next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. And now we have a Q&A session. You can ask the current honors thesis students questions about how they have chosen their topic or how they applied. You can also ask the summer 2021 grant recipients about their experience. You can ask Dr. Donna Gillespie, Dr. Clara Peter, or me any questions that you think we'll be able to answer. So time for Q&A. Questions?
So I also would like to draw attention to one very important website before you start asking questions. Geetha, can I share the screen?
Yeah, let me. You should be able to share screen now.
Okay, it's right here. Okay, so this is undergraduate research opportunities at the American Economic Association. So you can look here. So in this website, you can see information on different conferences, but that's not only UNC conference, but conferences which are created at various economic associations, just specifically for undergraduate students, or where undergraduates can actually participate in session. And so you can see the list so potentially, so that's, I don't know, probably that's a question to ask the chair of the department and director of undergraduate studies, if there's any funding available for travel to the conferences, or some of those conferences are likely to be online right now. So I don't think there's lots of cost associated with participating in the conferences. Of course, there's a list of journals for undergraduate students research where you can publish your research. I will talk about this in my honors thesis class, but this is for other students who also are interested in potential publications of their research, and there are some opportunities for undergraduates. So that's what I wanted to draw your attention. Okay.
So questions?
We need the student that's studying interactions with faculty. You got 3 female faculties here, faculty members.
Feel free to also ask questions in chat if that is easier. Okay. How do you reach out to professors? Okay.
All right, honors thesis group, can you answer to this question? How did the people, how did you decide on your topic?
I'll go. I applied for the guest grant over summer, and so in that paper I found that there was a transition from indications that the Premier League displayed signs of labor market discrimination, where in a 2000 paper they found that it did display signs, and then in my paper I found they didn't display signs. So the next question was, why did this transition take place? And that kind of led me to this topic, looking at the relationship between labor market discrimination and competition.
So the next question is, how do you reach out to professors at the first place?
Maybe somebody else, Geetha, can also answer to the same question, because people find research topic differently.
Okay.
So if somebody else wants to share about how you found your research question, that would be great.
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I knew I wanted to do something in the macro area because I had just happened to take more macro classes. That's how my schedule ended up working out. And so I was a bit more familiar with macro topics. And so kind of when I was finding an advisor, I talked with my advisor about, potential topics, and he gave me ideas basically, and was very helpful in directing that searching process. And he gave me some, reading to look over to see if it was a topic that was interesting. And I was like, yeah, this sounds good. So that's kind of, it wasn't as difficult. Like, it wasn't just like you by yourself trying to think of something. Like, there was a lot of help from a lot of people.
Thank you.
So I was going to add, and maybe this answers both of the questions at the same time. As a faculty member who has had honors thesis students or even summer research students come to me with potential topics or just asking me if I'd be willing to advise them or something, they usually come with some ideas in mind. But as undergraduates, I mean, often your ideas are really, really broad, and we need to help you narrow them down, or they're so specific and we know the literature maybe better than you do, or we know what data sets are available that, it might be a great idea, but we can say there's no way you're going to be able to find data on that, or it would be too hard in the next 6 months to find data on that. So I think coming and talking to faculty members and being open, like Lene said, just being open to hear what they think is interesting is important to help you hone in on a good research topic. But in terms of just reaching out to professors in the first place, I would say if you've had a professor, an instructor that you really enjoyed, even if you didn't visit them in office hours, I would strongly encourage you to, I got my finger up here, I would strongly encourage you to visit them in office hours and establish a relationship with them. We're not scary, we're not bad. We want to talk to you about your ideas and about the class. And so if you've established a relationship with someone, you can just go to them and tell them what your interests are. And then they can say, well, you know what, that's a really interesting topic. I'm probably not the best person for you to talk to. Why don't you talk to, and then they'll mention another professor. And then, I could send an email to that professor saying, okay, Gladys going to call you or email you and ask to speak to you or something like that. And that way it's not like a cold call to a professor that you don't know. So I think, again, establishing that relationship with somebody in the department is a useful way to start talking to potentially other professors about research.
Yeah, I also would like to add here, because just don't only contact people with whom you took classes. So a lot of research faculty actually do not teach 400 level classes. Many of them teach 500 level classes that you will take in senior year, or they teach PhD level classes. So the way how I approach research faculty is just first by going to their website, seeing what type of research they're doing, maybe reading their papers, and then meeting with them, saying that, I'm interested in your research. I would like to talk about this. Can I write on a similar topic, or maybe a tangent topic to that one? So it's also a very good way to establish relationships. So you do not need really to take classes, but just meeting with them and finding a good match, that's actually a good strategy as well.
And that does kind of amount to cold calling, which is fine. But know that we encourage our faculty at particular times during the year to be on the lookout for you honors thesis students, for example, or the summer research students. So they have a heads up that you might be emailing them even if you don't have a relationship with them. So they should respond to those emails.
Hey, thank you for that. I had another question. So, so far I've only taken like 101 and I'm taking 410 at the moment. So I was just wondering, like, when, like, say we received the grant, or like, I received the grant, I'm doing the research. How much of that like econ knowledge would we have to, like, do we just use the methods we've learned in class, or do we do some outside research to see how to use some other methods that we haven't looked at in classes yet?
Who wants to take that one? I can do it.
Okay, and then I will add if needed. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's perhaps a little early. Well, if you've only had Econ 101 and 410, there's a lot of economics that you haven't been exposed to yet. And so that might be a little bit early, but then at the same time, I'm thinking, what a great way to learn about what your interests are, by just diving in head first, and just doing it your second year or second summer or something. So that would really depend on who you are working with. I mean, the faculty, if it's a summer research project, the faculty are there to help lead you in your summer research. So there might be some things that you might need to learn through your reading, but they could guide you. I mean, that would be their job as the faculty lead, is to help you and they would understand where you're coming from if they agreed to work with you with just those two classes. So if you're really gung-ho and you are really looking to demonstrate to the market that you've been working independently on research. I was just at a presentation last night it was on data science, but they were suggesting even having such projects to share, like put on your LinkedIn site or put on a blog or something. And so the more you do this, the more you're going to have to share, even if it's a project that you do in class that you think is something worthy of demonstrating the skills that you've developed. So I think it's a great idea to pursue. And if it gets you more and more interested in economics and helps you figure out which courses to take, then that's it's good to see that eagerness to jump in.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Troy, did you want to add something or no? No.
I was just going to say that for summer research, it's a little different because you have that it's just a little bit different because with the honors thesis you really are recommended to come in with 470. So obviously it's a little bit early, but I came in with the core econ, like the 400, 410, 420. And then after that, after you take 470, like you're equipped with the knowledge that you need to tackle most any research project.
Yes, thank you. I think, so yeah, it's also would be my recommendation is to take 470 earlier. So in junior year for sure, because that would help you also with doing research in the summer, and it's actually a prerequisite for getting into the honors program.
And it's a prerequisite for our BS degree.
Yeah.
I want to add that in the past few years, we have given summer grant twice to students, to underclassmen, when they exhibited a lot of passion and yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So there have been cases where we have given a couple in the last few years, 2 students without, taking 470, but they were highly driven and we felt they would do good research.
Thank you.
All right, so there's another question about, do most honors thesis students do summer research? I believe no. I believe some did summer research, right? Like Nico did, right, summer research, and Yuan did summer research, but most students What did you do during summer honor students? Did you do any research? Elise, Linnea, no? So maybe internships? Is that right? Yeah.
I had an honors thesis student who also received, it wasn't one of our econ department summer fellowships, but it was the SURF, Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship that's offered by the college. And he actually went to Argentina and collected data knowing that he was going to write an honors thesis. So he used that time in the summer to collect the data. And then we worked during the year on the honors thesis. And we actually just got that paper published in Health Economics. So that was exciting for him. He also is now finished med school and he's a thoracic heart surgeon, but he excelled in economics as well.
Thank you so much. So we have another question. This question will be for honors thesis students. How did you find balancing the intensive work of research with the rest of your academic and extracurricular workload? If anyone wants to answer, that would be nice.
I can pull the trigger on another one.
All right.
As far as balancing with the thesis, it really helps that you're doing it in your senior year, because the econ major itself, since it's I think it's 8-9 core courses, it's kind of easier to clean up those requirements, so you can come into your senior year and have that thesis be your number one concern and like your number one priority. I would highly recommend, if you're going to do an honors thesis, definitely come in, like, don't plan on taking a bunch of other econ courses throughout your senior year, because the thesis is really cool, it's really fun, but it's also really demanding, and it takes a good amount of time to come up with a topic. It takes a surprising amount of time to come up with a topic, but it's just a really big process. So I would highly recommend it being your like big class for the semester or for your senior year.
Yeah, I want to agree with that. I'm double majoring in econ and stat right now, and I'm taking 2 really hard stat classes, and it's definitely a lot to, you know, balance like the thesis with these classes, but also it comes down not only to like your time management, but also like communicating with your professor. And I have a great like thesis advisor, and Clara's also really understanding. So if I have like a heavy workload for 1 week, I just like try to get stuff done the week before, the week after. So like just kind of keeping long-term goals and like looking ahead in the weeks ahead and like planning is really important, and also just keeping your professor in the loop and keeping them updated on like where you are in your thesis.
Thank you so much, guys. That's very good answers. There's another question from Sam. What activities and experiences would you recommend I consider to help to come up with a research topic? So anyone wants to answer to that question?
I guess, yeah, I can answer. I don't know, this isn't really like an activity, but just like keeping yourself up to date with like the news, or even like reading like academic like articles if you can. That will really help with coming up with a topic, because you will see what people are already working on, and maybe if you have some lasting questions after you read their research, or just about things in the news like current events, that would definitely help a lot, I think. And then also just taking courses that are not necessarily like research courses, but they're research heavy, so that you'll already have some experience like formulating a paper.
And I can add to that one too. Like at the end of my sophomore year, I like knew I wanted to do some kind of research, but like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I honestly just like emailed a bunch of different professors, like and like the public health school and like the econ department, because like that's where my interest was. And it just happened that like one of them responded and I got to do research yeah, last summer and the like year before. And so honestly, just like emailing a lot of people is really helpful, and everyone's super nice and responsive.
Thank you so much. This is a great advice. Thank you. Okay, one more question. Okay, I'm trying to decide on another area of study like stats or programming that would augment my econ research. What classes outside of econ have helped most in the honors thesis process? Anyone wants to answer? Okay, Troy, go for it. Yeah, thank you.
Just really short. A lot, and I mean a lot of people decide to pair economics and statistics. That ends up being like I'm in Econ 390 right now as well, the special topics data science class for Econ, and I would say probably half the class are double majors in stat and econ. So if you're really trying to like augment like your research skills and you really want to get that get those kind of data superpowers together, stats is an excellent choice, because especially in statistics you do kind of programming with you do programming insofar as programming like cleaning data sets, building models, things that you're actually going to use in research. So a background in statistics is super, super helpful.
Thank you. So, right, Gita, I don't see any more questions. I would say also wanted to add that any 500 level courses would really help you with honors thesis. So because in 500 level courses, we generally teach how to do research, and students are required to write research papers, so they gain those skills working with the data. So I think it's definitely would be helpful if you early on, if you have the opportunity to take 500 level courses.
I think we got some very good questions. Any other questions? So for the fall 22 honors thesis class we will be sending a notification sometime in spring. And there's an application process. So it'll be a message from Dr. Clara Peter. So look out for it. I'll keep sending reminders also to the listserv about deadlines.
Geetha, do you want to answer Mark's question in the chat?
Let's see, the new one.
The answer is yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh yeah, the answer. This, I mean, for spring semester, we have a lot of seats available in Econ 470. I think we have close to 50 seats available. Many of the other classes are full. So now, I mean, if you have taken 400 in your sophomore year, you can, I mean, if you took 400 in fall of this year, you can take 470 in spring 2022. There are plenty of seats available. So I think you should. We have 3 sections of 470 in spring.
All right, students, that next question in the chat's for you.
I can answer that one. So for me, the most satisfying thing has definitely been kind of like the knowledge that you gain along the way. So at the beginning of the semester, I think I'm not alone in kind of being a little bit lost as to what my research was going to look like, and just generally like, finding the work hard. And then as the semester goes on, I look back at what I did at the beginning of the semester and I like suddenly realize how much progress I've made. And like all the little things that I've learned throughout the course of the semester that I didn't even realize that I learned. So it's just very exciting.
And I would say that it's, oh, Lene, I'm going to let you talk, but I would also say that it's even going to get better. You guys are in the throes of it. And so you're probably like thinking, oh my gosh, I've got so much to do. But once you finish, I mean, it's going to be like, you will be able to look back on it and see how you pulled together so much information from your econ classes over the past 3 and 4 years. And it'll be that much more meaningful to you. Yeah, go ahead, Lene.
I'd also say that getting to work with Dr. Peter and also our individual advisors, like with a professor who is just super knowledgeable in their subject area and really knows what they're talking about, it's just always interesting to listen to them talk about the research process and give helpful information, and they're all super great. So that's one of my favorite parts.
One last time, any more questions? Okay, so thank you everyone. First to the presenters, to my chair, Dr. Donna Gillespie, Dr. Clara Peter, and all the other attendees. Thank you for joining us today. And as Dr. Clara Peter said, this is the first time we are holding a symposium, research symposium for undergraduates, and we hope to continue this every year. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I will see my students tomorrow. Take care. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Good luck with your research, your theses.
Thank you.